My name is Lee Short. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to you this morning. I'm submitting as a private citizen who's deeply worried about the direction in which our country is currently heading. I ask myself, what kind of country do I want to leave my grandchildren and their descendants? Many of you may well be considering this as well. Is it to be a modern liberal democracy grounded in universal human rights? Or is it a divided nation where authority is based on one's ancestral origins? I'd like to begin by thanking the ACT Party for giving the public the opportunity to express our views to the government on the principles of the treaty. This bill paves the way for debate, enabling citizens in this country who have never been asked for their views on the principles of the treaty. Everyone must have the right to determine the principles of which they wish to be governed. Surely this is a far healthier way to shape our future together. It should not rest in the hands of a select few. I believe our elected representatives in Parliament have been negligent in not defining the principles. They've left a vacuum into which several have entered, attempting to force their views with any mandate on the citizens. Having the Waitangi Tribunal, the courts, various government departments who are not democratically accountable to the people decide what the principles are is not good enough. Especially so as these decisions are influencing our constitutional framework, often threatening core democratic values and equality of citizenship. We need to debate and agree the principles under which we are to be governed. So I strongly support Principle 1. The Government of New Zealand has the full power to govern, and the Parliament has the full power to make laws. And they do so in the best interest of everyone in accordance with the rule of law and the maintenance of a free and democratic society. I support the principle of a single Parliament directly elected by the people. I also support Principle 3, the right to equality. Everyone is equal before the law and is entitled to equal protection and equal benefit of law without discrimination. Everyone is entitled to be equal enjoyment of the same fundamental human rights without discrimination. And I endorse Principle 3 for the following reasons. Equality before the law is essential. It's a cornerstone of human rights founded on the belief that every individual is entitled to fair treatment without discrimination. Furthermore, equality fosters social unity, playing a vital role in the development of a harmonious and just community. I do not support Principle 2 as proposed in the bill. The wording of Principle 2 proposes providing for different rights when they're specified in treaty settlements. This notion conflicts with Principle 1, democratic governance, and Principle 3, the right to equality, and a considerable number of treaty settlements that include co-governance and similar arrangements with iwi. Such provisions grant rights to iwi that are superior to those held by other New Zealand citizens. Co-governance models characterised by power sharing discriminate against other citizens by diminishing their democratic representation in the decision-making process. Moreover, with many settlements yet to be concluded, the possibility arises that the provisions in Principle 2 could end up thwarting the obligations specified in Principles 1 and 3. Because of the reasons outlined above, I recommend Principle 2 reverts to the original ACT policy as outlined in the coalition agreement, and arguably the one the ACT was elected to advance. This states the government will safeguard the authority of all citizens over their land and property. The treaty is recognised as a remarkably progressive agreement for its time. It began the journey towards universal human rights in New Zealand and allowed the nation to move forward, unified under a single government. Representatives of the British government made significant efforts to ensure that Maori understood what they were signing in 1840. Written records indicate the speeches delivered at Waitangi and later at Kohimarama in 1860 reflect this understanding. Te Reti Waitangi signed by over 500 chiefs in 1840 and reaffirmed in Kohimarama in 1860 after extensive discussions involving 112 chiefs, explicitly acknowledged Crown sovereignty. For example, all 112 chiefs present at Kohimarama conference unanimously pledged to do nothing inconsistent with their declared recognition of the Queen's sovereignty and of the union of two races. Some who oppose this bill would have you believe it sets out to change the wording of the treaty. This is untrue. The bill does not modify the treaty's text at all. On the other hand, in relatively recent times, there has been a deliberate intent by some to reinterpret the articles of the treaty, interpretations that alter the treaty's meaning. For instance, there is no mention of partnership in the treaty, nor is there any mention of principles. These are contemporary concepts that are undermining the very purpose of the treaty, which aim to create a unified nation founded on the principle of equality of citizenship. The discussion we should be having now concerns our fundamental rights based on a constitutional framework that has evolved from the treaty. We, as the people living here now in New Zealand, should refuse to be ruled from beyond the grave, to be required to follow an ancient, disputed and confused text. We must declare that we have freedom to decide for ourselves, for our time, that we are equal and live in a sovereign nation with one government, one democracy and undivided rights. I envisage a nation rooted in liberal democratic spirit that preserves equality of citizenship for all citizens, where we are governed by democratically elected representatives accountable to the people, accountable to all the people. I submit there is no promise in the future for a country based on ethnic division, where political rights are based on racial classification, where diverse policies and special rights based on ancestry erode the principles of a free and strong democratic society. Make no mistake, I support addressing treaty settlements to resolve historical injustices. However, since 2010, there's been an increasing trend to incorporate co-governance and similar arrangements into these settlements without consulting, let alone seeking the consent of the people. While I support cultural and commercial redress for treaty breaches, I do not support settlements that are of a constitutional or political nature. It is essential we complete this process and put it behind us and move forward as a unified nation. A future divided into two sovereign entities based on ethnicity or race is not viable. There is no future in tribalism that would lead us back to a troubled past. Therefore, I submit that the three original Act Party principles: the New Zealand government has the right to govern New Zealand, the New Zealand government will protect all New Zealanders' authority over their land and their property, and all New Zealanders are equal under the law with the same rights and duties. I submit that these principles advance to a nationwide referendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. We've got some time for a couple of quick questions. We'll go first from Steve Abel, then WhangāreiTim.
Kia ora. I wonder, I feel like I can speak for our demographic somewhat. We've had a lot of submitters who are in the category of older Pākehā men. And I just wonder if we are, in a sense, sort of victims of a failed education system that hasn't taught us our history, hasn't taught us about constitutional frameworks. And shouldn't we be celebrating that we have a whole younger generation that's actually taken on board deep principles of cohesion that are embodied in our founding agreement, rather than sort of deriding it and using the Hobson's Pledge talking points to undermine this sort of progress?
Well, I would put, Chair, I would put to the member that the people who are being educated today are being miseducated. The facts are there from the signing of the treaty and our history, but they're not taught that. They're taught a sanitised history that suits the treaty principles bill, treaty principles. So I think that the younger people today are misled, and that's quite apparent when you look at some of the submitters today and before who are in our academia, because they certainly have an ideology that is wrong and is very much different than a unified society.
Okay, thank you, Lee. We'll go to WhangāreiTim, Maipī Clark. Last question.
Kia ora. You've stated in your submission that Queen Victoria was a firm sovereign during the treaty, the signing of Treaty of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. What's your personal opinion of her successor, King Charles, who stated we must not hold referendums and must not ignore Te Tiriti o Waitangi? What's your personal view?
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that view from King Charles, but I do know that Victoria was quite clear in her notes to Hobson about what should happen for the treaty, and so I'm pretty sure that the record will show that the Maori knew exactly what they were signing. And the records, the written records of that time show that as well. And they're extensive records.
Thank you, WhangāreiTim. Thank you, Lee. Thank you for your time for the committee this morning. We appreciate you being with us and speaking to your submission.